What would happen if we took current Yuji as of chapter 268 and placed him in the Chunin exams? Do you think he has any shot at winning? Let's find out today if throwing hands no jutsu is really as powerful as we all think. The Chunin exams have it in 3 stages: the written portion, the Forest of Death, and of course the tournament. Starting in the written section, we'll immediately have a problem, because Yuji, much like Naruto, falls into the trope of mildly dim-witted characters with a lot of guts. So basically every battle shonen protagonist. So a written test would surely screw him in the event the test was actually real. However, the written portion of this exam was only meant to test the willpower and resolve of the applicants, and even by Sukuna's own admission, Yuji by sheer willpower and determination has risen to rival the King of Curses himself. So there's no chance that Yuji would reject the final question and risk failing both of whoever his teammates are. So Yuji passes the first section with flying colors. Speaking of team members, we should address that, because the next section, the Forest of Death, is a test of survival, tracking, and teamwork. So for the sake of simplicity, let's say he tags along with Team 7. The Forest of Death is rather simple. Really, it's just a free-for-all tournament mixed with capture the flag. But Yuji's abilities aren't exactly well suited to tracking down targets or sensing at long distances, so his aptitude, as per usual, will be measured by his ability to physically dominate the opposition and take their scroll by force. So here's where we're going to talk about how powerful Yuji would be in the Naruto verse. And instead of taking the power scaling approach, we're going to do something a bit different, because Yuji gets absolutely slapped by 95% of the Naruto verse even at this point very early in the series. Plus, I already have a 12-minute video cleaving and dismantling Yuji with all kinds of slander and accusations. So instead, we're going to take a look at his feats and statements and equate them to characters in the Naruto verse and use that as the baseline for his physical attributes. Physically, Yuji is an absolute beast. Throughout the manga, the other sorcerers have marveled at how physically imposing he is, and Gege has made it a mission statement of the series that Yuji can throw hands. The series begins in June of 2018 and is currently somewhere around December 24th of the same year. And in those 6 months, Yuji has gone from being above average as far as human standards are concerned to someone that Sukuna, the King of Curses, sees as someone who can rival him. And unlike most other shonen protagonists, Yuji doesn't really have that many hacks to get him to that point, other than his physical gifts. So saying that Yuji is an absolute monster is more than an understatement. However, Yuji doesn't really have any statements regarding his cursed energy reserves like Gojo, Sukuna, or Yuta. But it can be assumed that he consumed the other death paintings and obtained significant power through them in supplementing his cursed energy and overall stamina. So if we're going to equate him to characters at this point in the verse, his raw physicality and martial arts skills has to place him next to the other top tiers like Neji and Rock Lee. Given that Yuji is capable of fighting a monster like Sukuna and overcoming him with effectively raw hand-to-hand skill is wild and cannot be overstated enough. This really should place Yuji far above the rest of the cast, considering Sukuna's equivalent would be Madara in terms of overall stature, presence, and fighting potential. And Yuji boxed him into submission. But to keep things a bit tempered, we're going to assume that in terms of physical attributes, Yuji scales above most of the Genin by some margin. This, of course, isn't accounting for power-ups or transformations like Gates or Naruto's Kyuubi forms, but we'll talk about those later. Back in the Forest of Death, and if we follow Team 7 path, it'd see Yuji facing off against the disguised Orochimaru, Team Dosu, and ambushed by the Amigakure trio. Now, you may immediately think that Orochimaru stomps Yuji, but if we look at the nature of Orochimaru's body-snatching jutsu, living corpse reincarnation, it is effectively the same mechanism that Sukuna utilizes to take a joyride in Megumi.
Hey, yo!
But Yuji's ability to dismantle the boundary between souls is incredibly effective against those that have reincarnated into another's body, like Sukuna and like Orochimaru. So I think in Orochimaru's arrogance, Yuji would land a blow here and tear apart the boundary between Orochimaru's soul and the body he's inhabiting and render him weakened. Remember that Orochimaru's jutsu is far less refined than the methods utilized in JJK, as his body's periodically rot. So it could be said that he'd have even less resistance to any of Yuji's attacks than Sukuna displayed. Either way, Orochimaru is fended off, Sasuke is bidden, and here's about when Team Dosu are supposed to attack. But they would have just witnessed their Kage getting packed up by Yuji and the rest of Team 7, so I highly doubt they'd move to engage. This moves us to the Amigakure ninja, and genuinely, they stand no chance. Their main gimmick was intangible clones and the ability to submerge themselves underground. And under no circumstances can I say that Yuji would have any difficulty dealing with this pack of trash, especially when Naruto and Sasuke were there to give meaningful support, and Sakura was there to... So Yuji does what he does best, throws hands, and they get the 2 scrolls they need to enter the 3rd round of the Chunin exams, and Yuji is successful through the Forest of Death. Now, moving to the tournament, and the issue is, if I randomly match Yuji against the cast of Genin from the preliminary rounds, it's almost guaranteed that he'd violate his way through the bottom tiers. So in order to remove any RNG and really see if Yuji could definitely win the Chunin exams, this is how we'll go about it. There are effectively 5 or 6 matchups that give him any difficulty, so we'll have to talk about all of them. Otherwise, Yuji could just dodge his bad matchups by random chance, fight someone like Sakura, and of course he'd proceed to the finals. So instead, let's see how well he fares against someone like Rock Lee, in theory his contemporary. At base, Lee's getting clobbered here. For one, Yuji's array of abilities are far too broad and difficult for Lee's specialty of punches and kicks to get through. Secondarily, reverse curse technique exists and is almost a completely foreign concept to Part 1 Naruto. Region Hex doesn't really get introduced till Shippuden with Hashirama cells, the greatest plot device since Binding Vows. With reverse curse technique, Yuji's all but immortal in a fight where killing is prohibited. Not that the rules stopped Lee from trying to absolutely murder Gaara with the Hidden Lotus. But beyond healing hacks, he's incredibly tanky. Yuji's durability is top tier in the JJK verse. I mean, being a boxer in a universe where people can drop meteors or create black holes really builds up your tankiness. Who would have thought? Now, that's just base Lee, with his weights off, let's say. Once he starts activating gates, especially after the 3rd gate and above, he's really going to outpace Yuji dramatically and wear down his relatively low reserve of cursed energy by forcing him to heal over and over. But Yuji did withstand countless barrages from Sukuna, so I will ultimately say that he outlasts Rock Lee, healing whatever damage he's dealt as Lee destroys his body with the gates. Now, normally Yuji would move on to the finals, but just for fun, let's match him against someone completely different like Shino. On paper, characters like Shino and Gaara are hard counters to Yuji in his close quarter skill set, unless he can severely outpace them like Lee was seen to do. The swarm of disjointed hitboxes makes it really difficult for him to close the gap and land meaningful blows. However, Yuji has battled characters who utilize annoying projectiles like Mahito and Hanami, and it's here where that experience comes into play. Weaving and dodging through the waves of insects, I think he could land some blows on Shino, and so long as he keeps his reverse curse technique active to ensure that the parasitic bugs don't pierce his skin and consume too much of his energy, I think he can come out on top. Divergent Fist is just way too much for characters like Shino who have a pretty poor ability to defend themselves in close quarters. But the fact that Shino in theory could give him any trouble is a bit unsettling when we still have the top tier getting to contend with. Moving into the finals, let's assume that Sasuke, Neji, and Naruto have all made it through. I'm gonna leave Gaara out because I'm genuinely terrified to think what would happen when an unstable Jinchuriki gets hit with punches that sever the tie between souls, considering Yuji has absolutely nothing to deal with something on the scale of a tailed beast. We'll start with Sasuke. After Sasuke came back from the 1-month training arc in between the preliminaries and the finals, he leveled up so much that his outfit had to change and he earned the ability to make ridiculously cool entrances. I mean, think about it. This level of coordination doesn't just happen by accident, which means Sasuke and Kakashi at some point during their training arc practiced this cold-ass entrance and apparently collected a ton of leaves. I don't know why I think this is so funny. Imagining Edgelord Sasuke practicing Ginyu Force level poses. Either way, Sasuke leveled up during the training arc to the extent that Lee and Guy were stunned by his improvement in overall speed, and that was without Sasuke's Sharingan active. In just a month, Sasuke leaped over the competition and bridged the gap between himself and Rock Lee, a character completely devoted to taijutsu. I'm saying all of this to further demonstrate how powerful a prodigy like Yuji would be in the Naruto verse. He's all the best parts of Sasuke, Rock Lee, and Tsunade all wrapped up with Madara level healing. So what are Sasuke's win cons? Well, 2 things, Genjutsu and Chidori. At this point, Sasuke hasn't shown much proficiency with Genjutsu, so I'm genuinely unsure of whether this could actually be a condition for victory here, but he did train extensively with Kakashi, a bearer of the Sharingan, and really an expert in the Dojutsu altogether. Kakashi is the only person who knew not to look Itachi in the eye for fear of being locked in a Genjutsu. Even Kurenai, the so-called expert, immediately was caught in Itachi's Genjutsu in an incredibly embarrassing way. So it's not a leap in logic to think that Kakashi would have trained Sasuke, someone who has a burning passion to take down that same Genjutsu master Itachi, in some level of Genjutsu in order to prepare for it. So what does Yuji do against it? Well, actually, he doesn't have much. Without Sukuna to wake him up from Genjutsu like a tailed beast would, and no real skill in dealing with this style of combat other than Hanami's Flower Field, but even Todo regards it as a non-factor in Hanami's skill set, I would think that Yuji would find himself completely lost against even the most basic Genjutsu from the Sharingan. But since it's inconclusive whether Sasuke actually knows Genjutsu to this proficiency, we'll just say that Yuji used a binding vow or something to make himself immune to it. Gege would definitely approve of that. So we're really going to be left with a Chidori, and again, the rules are bent when Gaara's the opponent, because the Chidori can do nothing but kill the target. There's almost nowhere in the torso where a lightning-coated fist running through it wouldn't lead to fatal damage and complete organ destruction, so I don't know why they were just going to sit by and watch Sasuke completely murder Gaara in the event his technique actually landed. So I'm willing to say, with the Sharingan and Sasuke's impressive speed, he's able to land a Chidori squarely. Does this outright kill Yuji, or incapacitate him at the very least? Well, it's complicated. Getting hit by any lightning-style jutsu would have some severe effects like muscle spasms or paralysis as the electricity courses through the muscles. And if this would be enough to disrupt Yuji's concentration and halt his reverse curse technique, I then could see it knock him out cold or sending him straight to the afterlife. But Yuji's resilience in the face of incredible damage is far beyond impressive, effectively face-tanking Sukuna's domain expansion without missing a beat. So even if Chidori landed and shocked Yuji's system, I firmly believe that he'd throw a counter-divergent fist and knock Sasuke out before the damage of the Chidori put him on his ass as well. It's a high-diff victory, but he beats Sasuke. Next, let's do Naruto. Naruto has a very simplistic combat style, but has QB amps and a ton of chakra. Shadow clones are extremely versatile, and Naruto, much like Yuji, has hands, so the boxing match isn't going to be completely one-sided, especially when considering the waves of dozens and dozens of clones wearing down on Yuji's stamina. But the real issue is that Naruto also has some form of regen and an incredibly powerful QB amp when he accesses initial form in V1. So here, we have our first instance of a combatant that isn't going to be worn down by Yuji's onslaught and can go the distance with him. But I also can't ignore the fact that Yuji could weaken the connection between Naruto and Kurama and potentially sever Naruto's ability to access QB chakra and his transformations, similar to what Sasuke did at the beginning of Shippuden. If that occurs, Yuji high diffs. If not, I still think Yuji takes it, with extremely high difficulty due to how unstable and limited Naruto's ability to access QB transformations at this point is. And if Yuji can outlast that, he more than likely takes down the knuckle-headed ninja. That leaves us with Neji, and I've been saving him in particular because he's without a doubt the hardest matchup for any close-range fighter. With the combination of the Byakugan and the Gentle Fist, Neji by far is the greatest threat to Yuji and his entire skill set. The Byakugan allows Neji to see the Tenketsu, and since we sort of have to assume that Yuji would have Tenketsu as a means of directing his cursed energy, the Gentle Fist, a taijutsu specifically designed to target and shut down those Tenketsu, bypass durability and damage the target's ability to manipulate energy, Neji poses the most serious threat to Yuji by effectively being able to counter RCT and damaging Yuji through his incredible durability. The fight would begin, and through their exchanges, with Neji shutting down Tenketsu and Yuji having to expend valuable cursed energy to repair himself, Yuji would likely find himself on the back foot, unable to match Neji's raw talent and dojutsu prowess with fists alone. But just as every battle protagonist has done when they're on the losing end of a fight, they dig deep and come up with the ultimate move that always works, the pinnacle of cleverness and latent protagonist energy. So Yuji does this and punches Neji really hard. This is when he sets loose his first Black Flash on an unsuspecting Neji, who would be wholly prepared for this level of offensive pressure. Now in the zone, Yuji continues landing Black Flash after Black Flash, mixing in divergent fists to throw off Neji's timing. Even as Neji lowers himself to take the stance of the 8 trigrams 64 palms, Yuji has climbed much higher in raw physicality than ever before and deflects each blow, landing a counterattack between each strike. And ultimately, I think Yuji takes this one home. Part 1 Naruto obviously scales leagues higher than JJK, and if we were taking power scaling into account, he loses. But I think by analyzing their actual strengths, abilities, and relative feats, and speculating based on that premise, we can find a more interesting discussion and perhaps some fairer fights. So yeah, Yuji can totally win the Chunin exams under the right circumstances with a little bit of deep speculation on cross-verse interactions and some logical reasoning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please do the YouTube stuff, it helps a lot.